Welcome everyone to another episode of Wasatch First Podcast. I'm with my friend Dalton Granger here from Morph Marketing, my other friend, my good friend here, Eric Lichtenberg from Peach Atomic, the guy with the headphones and the hat and the beard. We love Eric to bits, don't we, Eric? Give us another thumbs up.
Yeah.
We have a good episode listed for today. So we've had a couple themes recently, and we've met some really tough guys. Last week we interviewed a UFC fighter, but today we're interviewing our friend Spencer Holmes, who has background in SWAT. I'm gonna let him tell. How long were you in SWAT?
11 years as team leader.
As team leader, 11 years, pretty wild. But now he owns an investigation financial company called Hummingbird, right? Hummingbird, specializing specifically in criminal cases. But Spencer, like as long as we've known him, we've been working on the UDO project. He's just been a totally straight-laced, cool guy. He shared with us a couple stories how he grew up, and I was like, Spencer, we gotta. It's like these stories are wild. I gotta share this with more people. So we're gonna dive into this today and get to know you and your story a little bit more.
Awesome.
So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. So I've heard a little bit here and there from Elijah and stuff. So did you grow up here then? Have you been in Utah your whole time, or did you move to Utah and then kind of do stuff?
No, I grew up in a military family, so we lived everywhere. Every 2 years we were moving. Never went to the same school year after year. And so I graduated high school in Las Vegas, went to college in California and Texas, and then just on a whim bought a house in St. George and wound up in St. George about 20 years ago.
Oh, really? Just went to the place, liked it,
just
was like...
saw a house and said, this would be a great place to raise a family.
Recap that again. So Las Vegas to California to Texas.
Yep. Went to junior college, played volleyball.
Nice.
That was my way to get college paid for and make my mom happy. That was her goal for me, is to get a degree. And so I played 2 years in junior college at Long Beach City College, and then decided I had to get a fancy degree and went to Texas A&M. Graduated with an economics degree from there and played there as well.
Nice. So you got to go from junior college to the other guy and play as well.
And so that was a complete shift in lifestyle when you go from Southern California to College Station, Texas. It was awesome. I absolutely fell in love with Texas and loved it.
That's not near like La Jolla area, is it? Or where's Southern California?
Well, Long Beach, it's close to like Orange Coast, Costa Mesa, Huntington, just south of LA.
Okay, because I think about that and I hear that and I'm like, okay, Las Vegas, California, Texas, the political spectrum that you experienced.
I had no idea.
Wild.
I mean, growing up in a military family, it was one of those things. My dad was very apolitical. He did not talk politics. He was in the military and he just supported whoever was the chief, basically. And so he never talked politics. But I went to Long Beach City and it was a very liberal situation. I had no idea that the difference. And so when you go from that to Texas A&M, a very Republican, conservative situation, then you're like, holy cow, this is so much different. This is more along the lines of what I agree with. And then graduated, moved back to Las Vegas, and started a family, and then got up to Southern Utah from there. But yeah, I've had some political talks with my dad since then, and I go, you never talked politics or anything, growing up. He's like, I was in the military. You just served, and you kept all that out of it, because whether you're president's Democrat or Republican, you work for him, and Congress and all these things do dictate a lot of things, but he had a job to do. So
awesome.
Was it Army, Navy, Air Force?
He was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and so he was a squadron commander of at the time, a top secret stealth fighter squadron. Dang. And so I didn't see him much growing up. His work week was leave either Sunday night or Monday morning. He'd fly out from Nellis and come back Friday night or Saturday morning. And so his squadron flew these planes that were not public. And so he would go to Tonopah and sleep during the day, fly at night, and come home and couldn't tell us, my mom, anything. So we had no clue what he was doing until he retired. And then we started hearing stories after he retired. And he still is very close to the vest on a lot of the things he's done. But now he's getting up there in age, and I think he's realized that he can trust us and tell stories. And I have my grandmother, his mother, kept all of his evaluations, his military evaluations. And before she died, she gave those to me. And I would read those and look at all of from his whole military career, spanning Vietnam through all these different operations that he did. I would read these things, and he was a very, I guess, a lot of people really liked my dad. And so he was held in high regard. And I would read all these things, and some of them he'd get dings for things. And I go, "Hey, Dad, why'd you get in trouble for this?" And I'd ask him, when we're golfing or something, and he'd recall, "Well, yeah, I let a guy go fly a plane back to his graduation of his son, and then he crashed and killed, 13 people. And so I got in trouble for that." And,
oh my God.
Just random little stories that you're just like, he goes, "But it didn't really matter. I still got my promotion, or my pay raise that year." And the military was very different in the 80s and 90s.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So, but yeah, I asked him things like that, and I was so glad my grandmother kept all those, and my dad didn't know that I had those, and I finally told him, and he goes, "Really? You have all those?" But yeah, it's helped me in my career because when I worked on SWAT and promoted and became a team leader and in charge of not just as a sergeant, 5 or 6 people on my shift, now 18 to 20 people on a SWAT team. There are leadership and management things that I'd call him with questions, and he'd be very short and sweet with his answers and say, listen more, just random little things that he learned throughout his whole career that he would give me, and it's helped. And so it also helps that I have the proof that he knows what he's talking about, because he retired as a lieutenant colonel, as a squadron commander, as a very knowledgeable person. So it's been good.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's really, that's cool. So when he was traveling to other countries, would you go with him, like as a family, or is he literally going like, I've got to go to this place, can't tell you where, and it's a whole nother country and that kind of thing? Like,
not really. And so the only time we left the country was when I was born. I was born in North Carolina. My mother grew up on a tobacco farm as a North Carolina down-home girl. And so she wanted me born. She was pregnant. She wanted me born in the States. And my dad was stationed in Germany. So she had me in North Carolina. My dad flew home and wanted to bring me back to Germany where they were stationed. And so when you're born, you don't have a passport. No. And so they put me in a duffel bag and snuck me on a plane and snuck me back to Germany. Wow. And it's a great story that my mom... What? And so I was smuggled out of the country.
This is what I mean. He just throws these things.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. Like, you just casually say, "Hey, as a baby, I was thrown in a duffel bag and sent to Germany."
As my mother, which I believe her story, my dad, he seems to minimize it, but my mother says, "You were born. He did not want to wait." I had broad shoulders, so I had 2 broken collarbones to get me out of my mother. Oh, so wow. I'm wrapped up. I'm kind of just this little bundle.
Yeah.
And my mother breastfeeds me, puts me to sleep. And my dad is wearing, and this is 1976, he's wearing his full officer uniform in the military, and airports were totally different. You could just...
Yeah. Smoking cigarettes.
And so he said, in his words, he goes, "No one questioned a military officer at those times." Yeah. And so my mother breastfed me, got me to sleep, put me in a duffel bag. My dad carried it on, got on the plane. And I'm like, "You put me in the overhead compartment, didn't you, Dad?" And he's like, "I don't know about that. My mom says he did." And so once we got on the plane, they pulled away from the terminal, and they went up, pulled me out, put me on the seat, and no one questioned my mother or my dad, sitting there with the military uniform, and just smuggled a baby on the plane. Hey. And so I got to Germany, and then, a couple months later, I'm sure my passport showed up, and I have that photo, and it's me just a couple days old that they did before I left. It wasn't that I was illegal. It was just, they just didn't want to wait. So
that makes sense.
So I was telling you guys earlier, I grew up in a small town, and there was this saying that you had in these small towns, and it's called "Not my pig, not my farm." So it's, in other words, it's not my business. So back then, you're just this baby being shoved and people in an airplane. Just not my pig, not my farm. Wow.
You think about this lady that had the meltdown on the plane, and everyone's filming it, and it's all over.
Yep.
Oh,
and it's like she had a disagreement with a guy in the back, and now everyone's
that guy's
business.
Not real.
Yeah.
That thing,
It's funny.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you're right. Back in the day, especially if he's wearing this very, people respected those military. I mean, they still, I do, obviously, and a lot of people still should do.
Yep.
But you just go, okay, he's carrying his duff bag. He's on a mission. He's got something. You let him do his thing. That's so cool.
Yep. And he still walks around with that same attitude. Honestly, he will walk. We went to a gym one time, and he just walked right past the front desk. I'm like, Dad, you got to sign and check in. And he's like, why? Because his whole life he's been saluted and just walked in and done whatever he's wanted. He just kind of always had that attitude, and I thought that was funny. I've used it to my advantage in the private investigation world a little bit, but sometimes.
So were you raised then? Were you calling him Dad? Were you calling him Sir? Were you calling him did you have a certain way for you to refer to him?
Southern mom and a military dad. Everything was very proper. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. But he honestly wasn't around that much. We didn't see him. He would come home, and we'd have really Saturday afternoon to get caught up on house things. Sunday he'd golf, go to church, and he was gone again. So I was primarily raised by my mother, and so her growing up in the South was very proper and respect oriented. So she's pretty much who raised me. And then you go to after college. She passed away from cancer, but my dad has been in my life more as I've graduated from college and moved on and been in different positions with what I started in finance out of college and SWAT and now this. So we're close now, but really didn't have a relationship growing up.
I mean, it's got to be hard. It's a personal question, and you can say no to it, but like obviously, when you're that dad, you're providing for your family, and you're also defending your country. Many, and things he can't even talk about to this day, probably. But he obviously is now really into as much in your life as he probably can. But as a child, he missed out on, I'm assuming, quite a few events. And I would hope there's not a regret, because I know he's done a lot of great things, but does he miss things, or does he feel bad about not being around as much?
Does he?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
But in my terms, I don't hold any regret. I respect it. It's as a father now, you learn, like, you had a job to do. You had things to that you were responsible for. So I wasn't even mad then. I knew that's
awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't have any regret for it. My mom was very good about protecting my dad and explaining, he has a job where he is gone all the time. It's not his choice. He chose this over, different assignments, and it's very important to our country. And so I didn't have any regret at the time for it.
I just see, you can hear that where like, oh, they were never around. It's like, but you don't understand till you're a dad, and you do things that you provide for your family, even though there are times you wish you could be at these things. It's like, you've got to do what you got to do. And it sounds like that respect, your mother and everyone, it was like, you knew he had to do his thing. It wasn't, you don't get angry at him when he's out there, risking everything.
Yeah. And on the flip side, you look at it when I raise kids going, I don't want to move towns. I don't want to miss games. And so my wife and I are really, our motto is we don't miss these events. And so we go at all costs to every event, every game. They're all athletes. And so it's expensive and it takes time, but it's our priority because my parents were never at my games. And so
it's not that you hold a grudge, you just want to be there for them in many ways.
I would have loved it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mad at the time.
That's awesome.
Well, when you think about it too, and you could tell even just in like your work ethic and how you are, like sure your dad wasn't there, but he was. I mean, he was there in his influence. He was there in how he treated your mom and her respect for the family and for you guys. And obviously with, later in life, you trusted his opinion and his insights, right? Yeah. So to me, it sounds like your father was there, just there in his example that he set.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate when you say my father wasn't around because it's such a negative connotation. But in my aspect, it wasn't a negative connotation. It was just he wasn't around because of his job. He had a top secret job that he had to do and provided for us. And how can you be mad at that?
Yeah.
No, for sure. I get it. And that's the point is that you can take things so badly, but you look at it in the right way. it is something incredible what he's doing, while also still providing that good influence. Do you have siblings then, or is it?
So I have a sister. Yep. That,
Okay.
her and I are very close. She's 14 months older than me. She was brought into Germany legally. I was not, but yeah, her and I. She still lives in Las Vegas, where she graduated high school, college, and has a family down there. And so, her and I are very close. We talk throughout the week.
Nice.
We hate each other, but love each other so much. And so she's been my best friend and been such a help to me in life. So.
Yeah, if you don't go at your own siblings or your siblings, I poke mine, and I'm 6,000 miles from my sister, and I still poke her when I can because it's fun. You just love them.
When you grow up in a military family and you're at a different school every year, your only friend is the person in the bedroom next door. So it was good, and she was always more outgoing than me. I was very introverted and had a problem talking to people, and being a younger brother of the homecoming queen and a cheerleader, and all her older friends and guy friends would always.
What's her name?
Ashley.
So Ashley's younger brother.
Yeah. And so I was always,
that's how I was. My brother Steven was like this total champion. So I was always like, you're Steven's younger brother. So
I didn't call her Ashley in high school. I call her Ashhole, but she was always looking out for me. So
that's awesome.
It's family, right? It's what you do.
Yeah.
So
really cool.
I have a question. So you moved around a ton, you did all this, but you went to college, you finished high school, you went to college, you played, but you got your degree in economics, right? You said
Correct.
Finance and such.
As just on a whim, honestly.
Really?
I applied to the economics college because I had a good economics teacher in junior college, the only class I went to. Oh. When you play sports, sometimes certain programs you don't have to go to all the classes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they registered you for all these classes. You got all these A's, and you never showed up. And but the one class I went to was economics, and I loved it. And so I applied to the economics college at A&M, and it was a top 10 program in the country. And I go, there's no way in hell I'm getting into this. But you open the letter, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. Wow. And then you graduate, and then you're like, well, now what? And so my whole life, I'd always wanted to be a police officer. But when you graduate with an economics degree in Texas, they say, okay, you want to go be a professor? Are you going to law school? What do you want to do? Well, I don't mind managing money. I'd go, and I worked for a financial service firm, Merrill Lynch, and did that for 5 years because it paid a lot of money and it made sense.
Yeah.
Right. So that was my career path, and it was just completely bored. And 5 years after the fact, had bought a couple homes, moved to St. George, completely comfortable in life, and went out to lunch with my boss, and he goes, hey, I want you to be the branch manager. And I'm just a young guy, right? I'm not even 30 yet. And I go, well, that seems kind of like a pain in the butt. I don't really want to be in charge of all that. I make the same money from my clients, but I have to take care of all this. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? I go, I've always wanted to be a police officer my whole life. My family are either teachers or in military or in law enforcement. I've always wanted to do something for the community that I feel good about. And he goes, do that.
Really?
He's like,
That's
go.
awesome.
While you're young, while you still have your body, go do that. You can always come back and do this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that lunch very vividly. I remember where we were, what we ate, everything. And he just said, yeah, go do that. And so I tried out and got on in the police department in St. George, just kind of like how I got in the economics college. Like, holy shit! Like there were 100 people, and I got the spot. Okay, I guess I'll do it. And so it worked out that way.
So, because SWAT is different, right? You got your police officers.
Correct.
Like my buddy is a police officer. You do your tests. You go through the school and
Everyone's,
the academy. You
everyone
still do
starts
that,
in
right?
the academy, starts as a police officer. You're just a normal pulling traffic stops, going to domestic violence calls, doing the normal calls of service. With our department, you have to have a certain amount of time before you can test for the SWAT team.
That makes sense.
And so you also have a certain amount of time before you can test for promotions and things. And so I got hired at $15 an hour.
Nice.
And so I was making 5 times this at Merrill Lynch. And so my goal was to provide for the family. We'd had our 2 boys at the time, and we were sick of being broke. So I kept on the path of promotion, but I always wanted to be on SWAT. And so tried out for the SWAT team, made the SWAT team, then a year later promoted to sergeant, which was a pay increase. And so with SWAT, you have, there are very few full-time SWAT teams in the country, which means your Monday through Friday, your 40-hour week is all SWAT. There's very few of those. And so LA, Las Vegas, Dallas, I mean, just some of the big
cities that might need it on call.
Yeah, but 99% of them are part-time SWAT teams, which means you work your normal assignment, but then depending upon your role on the SWAT team, you might have a day or two that you devote to SWAT. In my situation, you have a day or two that you devote to a patrol shift. So you supervise guys on a patrol shift, showing up to 911 calls, things like that. The other days you're spending training or basically prepping for your SWAT to get your, because you are still completely highly trained, but you have to, the other 2 days you have to do street work.
Right. You're still serving the community because SWAT is not always needed as much as police officers, just because hopefully there's no those bad incidents happen very often to where.
But they do every week, and you're always on call. And so as a team leader, when I promoted, I went from an operator to an explosive breacher to a team leader. And so now as a team leader, you're always on call. You go to everything. You do all the operations planning. You do all the training. You do all the selecting. You're involved with everything on that team. And so when I joined the team, there were 18 people. And over the course of my career, we had 20. All 20 were hired or selected while I was on. And so that was a big thing for me, is to be able to be involved in their training, selection, and pick the operators that you're going into these situations with. So
it's a pretty big choice.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that I look back on going, such a great team, great guys that just had the highest character. And the most important thing I look at was, we had some guys that were small, some tall guys, big, burly guys, people that you would not want to see in an alley. And then we had guys that you would think were, math teachers, but they were the gnarliest, most trustworthy, character-driven, hold your life in their hands guys.
Yeah.
So
that's all, because you're getting to pick the guys next to you in a sense of if something is going down, they will be there to have your back, like just like a military at that point, because it's your brother in arms.
And we had the option to select guys, because every time we have an opening, someone would retire or couldn't physically handle it anymore, because it's a pretty grueling thing to keep your body at that level and to hold that equipment. But every time we'd have a selection, I'd sit on the board and go, I'm looking at character first. We had a guy that absolutely destroyed our test. Was the worst time I'd ever seen. And my wife knows this guy, and she loves him. She can tell within 5 minutes of meeting this guy. But worst performance I ever seen in a PT and firearms qual. And I said, I love him. I want that guy. And he would not quit. And he was in the hospital the next day. He had pneumonia before, but didn't want to say. Oh. And this guy is the absolute biggest stud on the team when I was there, because he just completely bombed. I'm trying to stop the test. I'm like, hey, you have to get this thing in 3 minutes, or I think that test was 3 or 4 minutes. And we're at 10 minutes, like, okay, enough's enough. He's on the floor trying to drag a dummy or flip a tire or whatever we're doing. And he's like, I'm gonna stop it. And find out he's in the hospital the next day. He had pneumonia. And I'm going, that guy. And the next test that came around, now he's a team leader on the team, and he's one of those guys that you want as a community, serving and protecting you. And so those are the guys that we would take on that team. So
that's awesome. It's a mentality and the character. You can't train that in somebody. That's something
you can train anything, but you can't train that.
Yeah.
Resilience.
They'll push through, like he would give everything to make sure. That's awesome.
What years were you in the SWAT? Like, when did this have been?
So I joined the police department in 2005, made the SWAT team in 2008, promoted in 2010, and then retired in 2021.
So you saw a pretty big cultural shift. I think in 2005 or around that area, a movie called SWAT came out around that time. Do you remember that? SWAT and like the Bad Boys era and like all of that. People.
Yeah, and I loved it.
Yeah,
I couldn't help but watch
Break.
it.
Point Break.
Yeah, I know.
So good. But I say that because I feel like obviously there's been a shift culturally in this country where there was so much support in that in that area, and I think most of us I always supported police when I was young. I was raised by a single mom till I was 12, and I remember for one Christmas she was struggling to afford presents, and the Shop with a Cop Foundation came in and took all my siblings and I and gave us $100 gift cards, and the SWAT team showed up in a helicopter at the Walmart in Layton. And Santa Claus hopped out of the helicopter and stuff and had this whole bag of things, but he had guys with guns behind him. So you're like, man, Santa's so metal. Like, this is great.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so for me growing up, and I'm sure for Dalton too, but for us, there was still that era of like really respecting and revering and honoring police officers. And obviously there's corruption like in any kind of industry and anywhere that you go. But a lot of that has started to shift. So I'm kind of curious, what's that been like for you from your time in 2005 to now? Have you experienced that? Have you not? Or
so when the Ferguson stuff, there were different things in like 2019, 20, pre-COVID, COVID. It really did shift. The interesting thing about St. George community, they were always very supportive. And so there weren't racial tensions. There weren't any issues with the police disrespecting or doing any, constitutional rights violations. And so the town was very supportive. That being said, politically, it did change in our leadership in the city. And so that ultimately did affect police officers. And so city council does control a lot of things, police chiefs, motives, and I guess that behind the scenes does affect. But with SWAT, I came on the SWAT team, and we're kicking in every door. We're kicking ass and taking names. And then it went to when I became a leader, like this is not the best way to do things. And so our strategy changed and had the complete support of the administration at the time.
Awesome. Nice.
And so the town was always very supportive, but there was a shift. I mean, we went through a lot of so-called riots. There were just gatherings in St. George where people hated police. And it was always a minute amount of people. And for every one person that hated police, 10 people were like, hey, love you guys, thank you. And very supportive.
That's awesome.
So I didn't really have a negative police career. I treated people with respect, and there's 2 people that don't like me in my whole career. And so one just got out of prison, one's still in prison. And I understand why they don't like me because I put them in prison. But my wife and I can go throughout the town and I'll say, I recognize that person, or someone will come up and go, hey, you're, Sergeant Holmes, Officer Holmes, Spencer Holmes, I know that name. And I don't even worry about it because I treat them with respect. And so if you're a good, honest cop, which the majority are, there are some bad, you don't have to live in fear and you don't have to worry about those things. But, unfortunately, like with any profession, there are some bad apples, and there are parts of this country that I would not want to be a police officer in because of how bad it is. So you don't know who you can trust, and I could trust all the people that I worked with. And so it was a good experience for me. It started to shift, and there were some political things with city council and mayors and things that just really left a bad taste in my mouth. And the opportunity opened up to get back into finance and into that corporate world. And I said, on the heels of a partner dying from COVID, said this is the time to be done. And just had a lot of changes in my life that it made sense to stop being on call and killing my body, because it's a rough life.
Yeah. And before we move on to that part of where you made the transition back into finance, because I have a couple questions, because when I think of St. George during that time, like the Warren Jeffs court cases were during that time in St. George.
05, 06.
05, 06. Okay. Yeah. So that was wild. So I'm trying to think, like, what's one of the like most interesting or crazy stories you had in SWAT in general? That's not so graphic that will get, people shutting us down on YouTube.
I was working a special overtime shift, so I'm doing traffic for, I think it was texting and driving or something. And as a SWAT officer, you have all your gear, you're always ready, clothes, everything's in your car, so you're always on call. And I'm on the radio listening, and a bank was robbed in St. George. And so at the time we had a officer's wife that worked there that I know, Lori, and I hear Zion's Bank was just robbed, 2 hostages taken. And you're like, this is kind of a sleepy town that we don't have violence that much. And so it's all hands on deck. And this person went in, robbed a bank, took 2 females hostage, and took off through the town. And so, you know, you spend the first 30 seconds running around crazy in your car, like, what do you do? What do you do? Okay. And it was always, everything in life relates to sports to me. And so I look at what Wayne Gretzky said. He said, don't go to where the puck is, go to where it's going.
Yeah.
So took off throughout the town, took some shots at some officers that were chasing him. And I said, where's he going? I know where he's going, because he's taking a certain route, and it was near my house in Washington. And so I go, funny thing, I was in a backup car. My car with all my gear was in the city, like, fleet, getting service done. So I screech in there, and I'm like, give me my car. They're like, we're not done doing work. I'm like, I don't care, I need the car. So, and he's like, it won't start, don't worry, you can't take it. So I grab all my stuff, get all my gear, put it in this backup car, and I haul butt to where I think this guy is going with this car. We have the description of the car, 2 females in there. And in SWAT, you have a order of importance, or how you look at things. And the most important thing is hostages, right? Innocents, civilians, and then yourself. And then the suspect is after that. So you look and you go, this is of high importance. This is something that I would lay my life on the line for. Because this is an innocent hostage. They didn't have a choice. And so you look at kids, and you look at citizens, and you look at your fellow officers, and then the suspect, and that order of importance always is in your mind. And so you're going to risk your life to stop this guy. So we chased him through the town, and he went into this alfalfa field and gets out of his car. Hostages run out. So they're free. They've free and away. Safe.
Oh, good.
And he runs into a field. And, he's in a field, like, we can set up a containment. And so I'm seeing all these cops show up and, like, get in the truck and set up a containment around where I think this guy is. And eventually, there's a funny story about that, but we're sitting containment of where he is, and get all your SWAT gear on. SWAT's taking over this situation. There's helicopters, there's other agencies involved. And we're really kind of waiting it out, trying to figure out this guy. And we have a description. He's dressed in all black, and he's got a bulletproof vest on.
So he came prepared for whatever this was.
And so as a SWAT team, we are the immediate action. So if anyone radios or anything, we're going to send an element in to address this person. And so a guy dressed in all black takes off running out of this area, and we send a team. I'm in that team to this guy, and we start yelling commands at him. He's not stopping. So we tackle him, and he is wearing a black jumpsuit with AirPods and just out on a run. Doesn't speak a lick of English. And we completely gave him the business. And we're on the street, and we're like, hey, you okay? And he's like, okay. He's like, we're like, sorry, you are not our guy. All right, let's get back. And he was roughed up pretty good, and he just continued on his run. And he probably went home and was like, I kind of got beat up by some SWAT guys.
He's like, man, that was pretty weird. But anyway.
We
come. What he was listening to? Eye of the Tiger or something.
And I just laugh at that, because we literally picked him up and we're like, hey, you good? Like, brushed him off. Like, sorry, you're not our person. Oops, we're looking for someone else. And got back to containment, and eventually the suspect took some shots and lost his life. But I look at that as one of those incidents that had a SWAT team and all the personnel not been in place, that would have been bad.
It could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah.
Wow.
But luckily, like my friend and her coworker were physically okay. I'm sure very traumatized from it.
So they got put in the car and just with this guy that's armed and dangerous.
He came
in
into
this
the bank
car.
armed and took those two and whatever little money. You never
Yeah.
get any money from a bank robbery, but
Dang. That's crazy.
Jeez. You said there was like a funny side story.
it was the guy
It was
that
the guy.
That's the that is
Yeah.
the one. Okay, that's crazy.
Because you do think of St. George. So pretty much what you're saying before we change the SWAT team. So you're over St. George. You're not in Salt Lake. Like you have different SWAT teams for different cities.
Correct. And so we actually have two in Washington County. There's the Washington County Sheriff's Office. They have a SWAT team that does dual purpose. They do outside things and they do jail things. We do just St. George City, but we also help in all the other cities, Ivins, Washington City, things like that.
Okay.
So, and a SWAT team is really broken up into two designs: the emergency response and the pre-planned operations. And so, pre-planned operations are drug busts or fugitive
makes sense.
apprehension, things
Yep.
like that. But the emergency operations are why you have a SWAT team for the emergency call-outs. And
Like
so,
the guy taking a bank hostages and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Okay.
What were the most common crimes that happened in St. George too? Were there a lot of drug related things? Like, because obviously
yeah, I mean, every town's got their drug issues. Honestly, the thing that we got most involved with were emergency callouts were domestic violence related issues. And so, and not to be stereotypical, but it's usually the guy, and it's usually, if they're armed, we get involved. And so emergency callouts or a disturbed person, mentally unstable, goes through a crisis, then we would be involved in that. And so it's those callouts really, they kind of all have their own unique story, but they're mostly domestic callouts or the pre-planned operations usually generate from like a county task force that has, hey, we've got information that this guy's got, pounds of something.
Yep.
And we need to arrest him. And those weren't, you'd plan for days on those things, and they were never fun because you'd spend a day or two planning and scouting and sneaking around and finding out if there's security cameras or kids' toys or where's this guy usually go at this time? Can we just arrest him away from the house and then go serve the warrant on the house? But the call outs where you're using the speed and violence, that's what you spend the most time training for.
Yep.
And you really don't use it that much, but you get so excited when you get that call at 3 a.m.
adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, we always know the ringer, and everyone has a certain ringer to that phone number. If that, it's like a bat signal. And when that happens, you're just like, okay, let's go. And before you know it, you go from being completely asleep to in 20 minutes, you're sitting outside of a house pointing a gun at something.
Wow.
And so those were what you lived for. And that's what, when you come home from those, it's hard to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so
I bet.
sometimes and this is universal for any police officer and probably any person, but when an innocent or a child is involved, it amps you up and raises your level of importance, going, this is a child being held at knife point by this guy.
Yeah.
And so you come home at night knowing that the child's safe, and then you go in and I always had to touch my kids and just kind of pat them and just say, okay, they're good. My kids are breathing, they're good. And once that was done, I could go to bed.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
One of my mentors this last year was a professor of mine at, he was an adjunct professor. He's Sergeant Jim Anderson of South Salt Lake City PD. And this guy's built like a tank. He's maybe 295 pounds, like 6'4", and just like this, just huge dude. But he talked a lot in this class that I had with him about what it's like to be a police officer. And he said some days you feel like you're the garbage man of people. You're kind of dealing with the worst of the worst. But you always live in this level of, like, normal people are right here emotionally, depressed people are down here, and police are almost always up here all the time because of that adrenaline, because of what's going on. And so that's why you get these major dips. And so they've had a lot more push into like mental health around police officers. So I wanted to ask you, what's that been like, just the transition? Because I'm sure it affected the way you saw the world, right? So has that been something you've had to deal with? Has that not really been a problem? Or
It is. I'm not the best at dealing with it. My wife will point out that you have some trauma that you need to deal with, because I still have dreams and just some unresolved issues that any police officer or someone in my position, it's natural. It comes with what you deal with. Some things you feel like you dealt with, 6 years ago, and then all of a sudden you can't stop thinking about it. And I have, I mean, I don't know of any police officer or someone that did what I did would be able to say that they're completely normal. And so it does change you. It does have an effect on you mentally and how you deal with things. I could stereotype the SWAT guys and all the issues they have, and it's comical because they all have certain issues that just come with the job at either a police officer or SWAT officer. It does take a toll, and that's what you sacrifice. The good thing is it's not an arm, it's not a physical thing, it's something mental that you could really get help for and work through. Some things I have, some things I didn't think I had an issue with, and then my wife will point out, and I go, yeah. She goes, therapy is not a bad thing. And so it's almost something that should be required for people that go through. Even a 2-year officer is going to see things, and doing CPR on babies just messes with you.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, I'm cool, I'm tough, I'm good, I go back to work. Well, in 2 years from now, you're gonna be at a family event and a baby's gonna choke, and you're gonna go into an episode. It does affect you, and it's one of those things that it's mental, so it can be fixed. But
what kind of resources do you recommend for people in that situation?
I went to some therapy, and it was absolutely the worst experience. But I've also talked a lot and just been open. And sometimes these are late at night, like staring at the ceiling talks with my wife, or even just, I was the person that people called when their wife was cheating on them or they were suicidal. And so I've had a lot of conversations on the back of my truck, or sitting in someone's house, or talking with them and just talking through things. And so talking and communicating with someone that understands what you're going through has been very good. I have a lot of friends that are therapists and completely support that. When I find the right one, I'll go to one. But I mean, they're professionals. They know what they're talking about. An old retired SWAT guy on the back of a truck having a beer is not an expert, but I've been there when this person is explaining his situation and what he's going through. I've been there, I understand it, and I'm a friend. So friends, having a wife that can just listen and not ask questions on why your dream was that way. We all have certain dreams. I've had a recurring dream that the bullet doesn't penetrate the person's head. Whoa. And you go, man, there are probably thousands of police officers that have a dream where they have the hardest time pulling the trigger, and they have to use 2 fingers and the bullet doesn't work. And, you have these weird dreams, and I can remember all my dreams, not all of them. I can remember most of them every morning. And my wife's like, hey, what'd you dream about? And I'm like, you don't want to know on that one. It could be, Taylor Swift one night, but then it's, it's something so dark and gruesome and just traumatizing that it takes you, the shower and getting ready for work before you're able to process that and going, I just felt so slow and helpless, like I couldn't do anything. And this was something bad was happening. And so I don't think that's normal to have those dreams at this point. So I'd be all about therapy to help with that.
Something we've because we've been in these with the UDOs and the mental health. We've actually been doing a lot of interviews with people like this.
A lot of mental health.
A lot of that stuff. And every time what I've noticed when they're talking about this kind of stuff, the trauma that you deal with, whether you've been in drugs, you've been in jail, you've been a police officer, these things that when you're going through a hard time is connections. Finding somebody that can understand with you and connecting with somebody is something so important. Like you're saying, you just talk with the guy, you've been in that situation with him, or you know this feeling, is sometimes better than a therapist sometimes, because they know you feel that connection. They know they understand you, and it's so important because they just need to talk about it. They need someone that can listen and understand that with them.
It's like great marriage advice too, right? When your wife's frustrated, just shut up and listen.
I had to learn that one.
And it's like, you want to fix it and you want to tell her, no, this needs to happen at your work. And this is, she's like, I just want you to listen.
Yeah.
And so, we get it. But as men, typically and there are female police officers, same thing. There's some badass females that I work with that have the same trauma. And it's like, if you could just have someone just sit there and talk and understand and not judge and go, you're not weird for this. You're not weird for constantly thinking about this death or homicide or this rape case or, it's great to just have someone to sit and listen to.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Just so everybody knows at home, Melissa, the wife, is here. So,
so she knows. So my question, you've gone a lot in SWAT, which is just some incredible stories, but how did you go so you went from finance to SWAT, and now you've kind of come out of it too, and now you're working with UDOs, and how does that, like, you obviously retired and said, I'm just kind of done with this, and now you're doing CFO work, you're doing your company, correct? Is that when you decided to start the company, was when you retired from the SWAT?
Kind of. And so I was a lot bigger and had 7 knee surgeries during SWAT. Like, it takes a toll on your body. And so I was 20 pounds heavier with muscle, and it just takes a toll on your body. I played college sport. Like, my body was worn out. And so knowing that, hey, a desk job might be in your future, you get to that point in your career where you go, I can't keep grinding out. My goal was always to be the strongest and most fit on the team. And I didn't want to be a team leader if I couldn't do that level. And so when you transition, you look at, well, what am I really good at? I understand people. I can read people. I understand finance. I did budgets for the SWAT team. I had the background in finance and was given a position at a nonprofit in the state here, Switch Point, which is a homeless service, as a chief strategic officer, which is like the biggest bullshit term ever. Like, what do you do? What's strategic officer? I'm like, I don't even know. So I had to figure that out, which involves a little bit of finance, a little bit of strategy, a little bit of legal, a little bit of human resource some days, a little bit of
wearing a ton of hats. It sounds like.
And so when I was with that company, and then a friend had linked up with UDO and said, I need someone in finance that understands balance sheets, P&Ls, can really investigate and call bullshit and be honest about what's going on with this company. And I said, well, I can be completely brutal and honest. Absolutely. And so I was brought into UDO in May and basically said, take a look at what they're doing and give advice, strategy, whatever you take. And it's been a change, honestly, with UDO, because we've gone from a company that had a huge payroll to now rebranding and resetting and getting into a better direction, a more profitable direction, better for the shareholders. So some of that rebirth has been tough, but that's what I was brought in to do, to make those suggestions, agree, call out irregularities, and just give an honest assessment. I don't have any motive other than just being a straight up person. And so hopefully that bodes well for UDO. I know the 2 founders I communicate well with and have the utmost respect, and they listen to me, and it's awesome, because it's nothing really different than SWAT. I mean, you're dealing with people, decisions, you plan ahead, everything's based on probabilities and character driven. So it translates, as weird as that sounds. It's money always has a way of like showing it works out. Like it's on paper. You can't lie about this stuff. And so, it's a different stress, waking up and stressing about finance things versus whether you trained hard enough and that you're able to handle this operation that was planned. But yeah, it's really the same thing, just planning and being character driven and working hard, I guess.
Yeah.
So you've been on Udo from May, right? So you've been
Correct.
pretty much, because we've been in with Udo for a bit now as well, but
Which has been awesome.
yeah, and we've loved it, and we've been keeping us busy. That's what every meeting something we got to do something we'll do because there's so much going on, right? And the rebrand and the reset has been really cool to see. Just like, okay, we're going in this really awesome direction. We're looking at it, and now, but so between retirement in 2021, did you question on that? Because my buddy, I just thought about this, he had to go to the riots in Salt Lake. And he's from Weber County. Were you guys pulled up too?
Not up to Salt Lake. No.
Not to Salt Lake.
We had our own in St. George.
That makes sense. You were there because he was in one of the big armored trucks and he was ready on call, and he just was in the jail. He wasn't SWAT. He was just like, we need every hand on deck because you never know what could go wrong.
And I mean, honestly, the police officers made a lot of money.
Yeah,
And that's what you have 50 college kids that want to protest something, racial, whatever their issue is, and you're going, we have 30 guys, we have snipers sitting up here, we have all this stuff, we've rented hotel rooms overlooking, we have all this, and we're all getting paid time and a half to sit here and watch you spit at us. Like, okay, it's stupid. It didn't accomplish anything other than they wanted their voice, and they but yeah, we had a lot of that.
It's that mob mentality. You can peacefully protest, but you never know when mob mentality might take over, and someone does one thing and then the mob takes over, and then you've got cars being flipped over and burned in Salt Lake City, and we were the mild compared to other cities that dealt with a lot worse.
My favorite was the 60-something-year-old guy who brought a bow and arrow up in Salt Lake, and he was wearing his forgivingly I say this, but he was wearing his Mormon like garments or whatever. He was wearing just that, and he had a bow and arrow, and he was shooting it at flaming cars. And I was like, I remember that time I was working in addiction recovery, and we worked in the jail, so we'd take people from prison or the jail to the addiction recovery centers and dealing with people who are really having these massive struggles in life, and then seeing that happen in Salt Lake, and you're just like, what the hell, kind of like, what has happened, right? So as we kind of like circle this around, so I want people to learn more about exactly what you do now professionally, because this isn't just like finance, right? You told us earlier how you do investigations too. So explain us your company's name as well.
It's Hummingbird.
Hummingbird, yep. So my wife and I started a company over a year ago. It was before Udo. And so I looked at what I'm good at. I understand strategy, finance, but I've also been asked to do private investigations, special investigations for defense attorneys. And so I said, let's start a company that I can do that and get licensed, insured, and set everything up. And so I do special investigations, which a defendant or a citizen gets charged with a crime. And so they'll hire a defense attorney. That defense attorney will not only rely on the state or the police investigation, they will want to conduct an investigation on their own, because there might be some gaps in that investigation. I'm that gap guy. And so anytime there's an issue with, hey, we don't have any video surveillance or something doesn't add up, can you talk to, the police never talk to any of these witnesses. You go out and you do basically the gap job, and you produce reports, you do surveillance, you sneak around, you get in and you find people that might be experts on something. I walked into the back of a Toyota dealer in the shop like I knew what I was doing, and just kind of looked around and ended up finding a mechanic that helped on one of our cases. And I'm just sitting back there in the back of a Toyota dealership shop, and no one, like, you're not supposed to do that. Like my dad would have done that, but I'm like, well, I learned it from my dad. But
interesting. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you keep going.
I was going to say, so actually a random fact about me, I love that kind of work, like personal investigation. The law firm that we have, Bishop Law Group, we've hired some private investigators before, but I follow a few channels, and there's this one channel that these two guys and this girl, they're like the easiest way to get into any building just carry a ladder with you.
Okay,
Two guys
yeah.
carry a ladder
I've seen
and have the
that.
girl carry a clipboard, and they get into Trump Tower. They get into like the back office of. They got into the Super Bowl. Actually, was one of the ones that they got into. It, just because
no one questions it.
Well,
Like,
just
just
two
like
guys,
looks like you're there,
two guys with a ladder and a girl with a clipboard.
I mean, I used to do my surveillance for SWAT operations in a Jimmy John's T-shirt.
really?
Yeah, you just get a loaf of bread. They'll give you a loaf of bread at Jimmy John's, and you just walk around the neighborhood, and you like walk up to a door, and you're video and you're filming, you're sneaking around, but people see a Jimmy John's person delivering, and they're just like, knock on the door.
Right?
You figure out how the door is constructed and how many people are and what the inside looks like, and before you know it, you're like, oh, this wasn't your sandwich. Oh, sorry, wrong address.
And so you've like looked at the culprit, going, I looked at you. They've opened the door.
They
And
have
they're
no
going,
clue, but yeah, and private investigations is no different. We came up here. I guess this was about 2 months ago on this one, but yeah, you just walk around, you just talk to people, and if you have the ability to talk to people, you can find out so much. And
people tell strangers anything almost.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I mean, I was renting a house near Target, I guess, so to speak. I was like, hey, my daughter's going to college. She's going to rent a house here. Just want to find out about the neighborhood. And this was the person that I was trying to get information on. And you just come up with stories and you just make shit up, and people believe you if you are honest, or if you have a good sales strategy about it.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Sometimes you'll find yourself, I was at a bar. We were watching someone. What was that? Like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm like, hey, I'm having a margarita at a bar. You want to come visit me? Because it looks weird. I'm sitting by myself. But we're actually like doing work and filming and getting evidence on someone. And I'm like, well, I'm getting paid to have a margarita and chips and salsa at lunch.
One of my favorite stories that I share with people from my mission sometimes is we were teaching this family in Runcorn, England. So Runcorn kind of by Liverpool. And we had taught this family for a while. It was husband, wife. They had like 4 kids. The husband struggled with meth on and off. So my companion, he was actually from, I think, either Snowflake, Arizona or Mesa, something like that. Never seen a drug in his life. So for him, it was just like this, whoa, crazy experience. I remember one day we showed up to teach him a lesson, and the husband was gone, the family was gone. And I was like, Elder Rapier, I was like, we can figure this out. Like, we can find out. Like, these guys didn't just disappear, get abducted by aliens. We can figure it out. So we knocked on the neighbor's door. They gave us some info. They're like, yeah, we think he got arrested. And so we went to the police officers, and they gave us as missionaries. This is so bad that I'm saying this. I shouldn't tell this story. But
You're already in now.
Yeah, I'm in now. They gave us these ministerial certificates in our white handbooks. And so I went up to the cops, and I was like, hey, I'm a minister, and I'm working specifically with this client. And they let me back in the jail to go talk to the guy. And the whole time, Andrew Rapier was his name. He was just watching me. He was like, are you allowed to do that? And I was like, hey, man, it worked.
Yeah, it worked.
So we got to talk to the guy, and we got to follow up with him and figure out the whole story. And he was like, yeah, well, we'll get out and this and this and this. And when we were leaving, one of the cops was like, so are you his, they don't call it lawyer, but counsel or something?
Yeah.
Like that. They're like, so are you his counsel? And I was like, oh, yeah, something like that. And we just left. So I envy your job, and I honestly envy. I think that'd be like pretty fun to kind of put on different hats every day, and
it's fun. It's
Carmen Sandiego style, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they're all interesting, and so depending upon if it's a rape or a homicide or a whatever case it is, they all have their toll too. Because we had one that just, I couldn't stop crying just watching some videos of this thing, going, man, this is bringing back some stuff, watching these 2 sons with their dads, and on this case, but you go, man, this is tough. I don't want to do this all the time. And so that's when I look at going, this is kind of my side hustle that I do because I'm good at it. But really what keeps us secure and stable in the house and pays the bills is UDO.
It's the CFO stuff and money.
So now you become an entrepreneur in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, and everyone knows there's write-offs, and I can write off a home office and things like that, so it's tax-wise, it's smart to have a little side hustle.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you, I would not hire my wife to do that because she's the most suspicious looking person. I can't take her. almost had to kick her out of the bar. I'm like, you're look at your face. Stop. Like,
Yeah.
You're giving us
be
away.
cool.
Yeah.
But
Can I have a margarita?
And she's just staring at the culprits.
Yeah, the whole time.
yeah.
That's the guy.
No, that's
You're just pointing at him.
she did all of that.
She'd be like,
Yeah.
I think that's.
You laugh like it was that bad.
It's okay if you say it. Is that true? Did that happen?
Unfortunately.
I think he murdered somebody. That's so bad.
What she'd be good at is just hand them the phone. Go, hey, honey, figure out this phone and get in there and tell me, what's on the
That's
phone. She
funny.
could figure that out.
Yeah.
Really quickly.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh yeah, he's cheating on her. And
This-
You can see the
Going
Snapchat
through-
oh, yeah.
story. He posted this
Yeah.
and this, and if you
Yeah.
know he's da-da-da.
yeah, her ability to figure that out is unmatched, but not in the field.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh!
that's
You need to
hilarious.
start a social media. There's this website or a Facebook group that this girl I was dating was telling me about. It's called "Are We Dating the Same Guy?" Yeah, she knows what. It is. Yeah, and so she told me this because she was like, "You're a good guy," and I was like, "Oh, thanks." She's like, "Yeah, I posted some pictures of you on this Facebook page to make sure you weren't
Oh my God.
suspicious." And I was
So,
like,
like,
"What?" Yeah, so this group, it's a Facebook group. Guys out there watching this, just so you're aware, there's a Facebook group. Melissa can confirm this, right?
Yes.
That is exclusively for women, and it's called "Are We Dating the Same Guy?" There's in Utah, there's 70,000 people on that group,
What?
and they post pictures of guys that they meet to see if they're cheating. or not.
That's-
Yeah. Yeah. You should run that page.
I actually had a friend who caught her husband doing it. So
No.
What?
I mean, good for women, I guess. Just don't cheat. In
I
the
don't see
first
guys
place,
creating the same page. I think it'd go a little different.
there is a guys page. There's
Is
only
it?
about 1,200 on there, and they share sports memes and King of the Hill memes. That's
Oh
all
my
that they
gosh,
share on there.
that sounds like
it's
guys.
so bad.
That's hilarious.
Oh, that's great. Real quick question: how did you two meet then? How?
So, interesting story. We met in 2020. I'd gotten a divorce. She had gotten a divorce. We met at a basketball tournament in St. George. And so
Wow.
we had known of each other for a lot of years. And she came up and really just sunk her teeth into me. And so we started dating shortly after that. She lived in Las Vegas. I lived in St. George. And blending a family. We have kids same age. And we're all very familiar with each other. And kind of just went from a basketball tournament, I guess, seeing it. Then we went on a date, and then before you know it, we just could not stop talking to each other, and
That's awesome.
decided to, with all the kids' support, they said, we love it when Melissa's up here from Las Vegas and comes and visits, and like, Dad, what are you doing? And so I was at the point in my life where I didn't want to have anything to do with girls. And so went through a rough divorce, dated a couple girls, and just said, you know what, screw this. I am just going to be a dad and a sports dad. And I do not want to have anything to do with women. Like, I just don't have the space or the emotional ability to deal with it. And so probably about 10 minutes after I said that, Melissa shows up, and it's been the best thing ever. So
That's awesome. Isn't that the case usually when you say, all right, I'm done,
Yeah,
I'm good, and
exactly.
the right one comes in, you're just like,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yep.
So,
Comes in and ruins your investigation business.
yeah.
because you got 5 kids, you were saying, right?
Yep.
And that's mixed, obviously.
Yep, I have 3. She has 2. Yep. And so we have one that's playing football in college, one that's home with us, one that's a senior, and then 2 freshmen in high school. Girls, the princesses.
Where does he play college ball at?
Carroll College. It's a Catholic school up in Helena, Montana.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
So, yeah, you're bouncing around with sports and everywhere with that many kids.
We're a big sports family, and that's a lot of the reason why Melissa and she will call me saying, have you seen this on this play? She's watching sports and into it more than I am. And our whole household revolves around sports. And so me having grown up playing it, my dad played it. He was actually a national champion water skier.
Wow. That's
And so-
impressive.
My dad and my mom both have brothers that played for the Orioles in the farm team at the same time. And one was a pitcher, one was a hitter, and they know each other. Everyone's an athlete in our family. And so same with her, really into sports. And so it's one of those things that we just had so many interests in common that.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. I know we're kind of on that time frame too, so I appreciate you coming. You've been really busy.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Yeah, I feel like next time we need to pull her in and talk about those stories you have there. And then also your dad. I mean, just the stories and the respect you have for him. It's really cool to see. So we're looking forward to, there's projects that we're working on together with this, but we're really interested in, learning more about Hummingbird and seeing like just what other cross-sectionalities we can have. So if people want to learn about you and your services, where can they go? Hummingbird-strategy.com. I'm not too big on social media, so, but yeah, you can get every bit of info that you need or way to contact me on hummingbird-strategy.com. Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Yeah,
just learning a lot. I love it. Every time I learn something really awesome from people that come in, so I appreciate that. And I think that's about it. So cheers.